In this lecture, I'll be sharing with you how to access and use Performance Insight. So before we can access Performance Insight, you want to ensure that it's enabled on your database instance. If you didn't disable it when you were creating your database, then it should be enabled by default. So select your database instances, select the database instance that you want to check if Performance Insight is enabled for, then select Modify. Scroll down to Performance, and on Performance Insight, we want to turn on Performance Insight. So the default retention period is 7 days. If you want to retain your data more than 7 days, if you want to retain your data for more than 7 days, then you can change it from the drop down. However, this will attract additional costs, as the 7 days comes with the free tier. Scroll down, and for additional configuration, we're going to enable enhanced monitoring. For granularity, you can change it from 60 seconds to down to a second. For the default monitoring role, we're going to select RDS monitoring role. Scroll down and select continue, select apply immediately, and then select modify database instance. In a few minutes when you scroll over to the status section, it will be saying configuring enhanced monitoring. While that is taking place, another feature you need to be aware of is the recommendations. You could also enable the Performance Insight from the Recommendations tab. So here it's indicating that Performance Insight is not enabled for the database instances, and they do recommend enabling Performance Insight. So I could have selected the database I wanted and then apply now. There are also other recommendations such as storage auto-scaling isn't turned on. In your production environment, you want to ensure that auto-scaling is turned on to minimize your downtime. So what happens in auto-scaling is that your database will scale from the initial size that was allocated to a maximum threshold which you specified. Also on the automated backups, here it's saying automated backups is not enabled for MySQL. So a trick here is to review your recommendations for some of the best practices for managing your RDS instance. On the enhanced monitoring for MySQL Express, enhanced monitoring is not enabled, which they do recommend. So let's go back to the databases. Now we can access the Performance Insight from the left menu. So select Performance Insights. For Performance Insight, from the drop down, you can select the database instance you want to view insights for. So I'm going to select MySQL-AX. So currently there is no activity on my database. So what I'll be doing next is that to get some activity on my database is that I'm going to be restoring an AdventureWorks LT 2012 database with some data in the database and then perform a few queries. So I've went ahead and restored the AdventureWorks 2012 database to my SQL server. So now I'm just going to head over back to my AWS console. Right. So as you can see, I'm now seeing some activity on my database where the active transaction log is showing some data on the metric counter. On the x-axis of the graph you have the time, and on the y-axis you have the number of transactions, right? So it's not a lot of active transactions, so it won't show much on the graph. So when you scroll down to database load, for the active sessions, you will see a comparison of the active session versus time. So it was during this period here the restore took place. So as you can see, the green section is the CPU utilized, right? The light blue is page IO latch, and the yellow looking here is the write log. So I could change the chart type to a line chart, right? And I could change the slice from wait to SQL. So it will show you the type of SQL statements that were executed on the database. So for this huge yellow spike, you'll see that it was the restore statement that was initiated to restore the AdventureWorks LT database to my RDS instance. So you'd see the exact statement that was executed. You can also filter by users to see which user is using up your database session or performing a lot of activity on your database. So here I was connected as the admin user, and as you can see, it was performing the most activity. You could also filter by host. This is where you have multiple applications or devices connecting to your database instance. So the primary host here is my laptop, which is MRJM and you will see a breakdown of the sessions per host. When you scroll down some more on your page, you'll have a section that shows top resources. So you have top weights, the number of weights on the database. As you can see, the top one was page IO latch. So you'll normally get this type of latch when the data pages are requested from the buffer cache by one or multiple sessions, but those data pages are not available in the buffer cache. So what SQL Server have to do is that it has to allocate a buffer page for each one of those buffers, and it will create the page IO sh latch on the buffer. Now on the top SQL, it pretty much shows you the SQL that was taking up the most amount of resource on the database. And for the top host, it pretty much gives you a summary of the same thing as well as the top user. Now I'm going to head over back to Management Studio and open a few sessions and then execute a while loop that will go forever. So this will put some additional load on the database. I'm going to open another session. This time I'm going to be selecting from a table so more data is returned. So I'm just going to grab the select statement and then I'm going to be dropping it in the while loop. Now let's execute. Now let's head over back to our RDS console. Now I'm going to change the time frame from 1 hour to last 5 minutes. Then select apply. So I open 2 sessions on the database. So now you can see that there are 2 active sessions. So I'm going to change this and set it to bars. I'm going to open a few more sessions on the database. New session. Execute. So this is really putting some load on the database. I'm going to do the customer table now. Select top 1000 rows. So instead of top 1000, I'm going to let it select everything. And then I'm going to put it in a while statement. So my Management Studio actually start freezing because this database doesn't have a lot of resource. So it actually starts hanging up. Now I'm going to execute the session. Now let's go back to the RDS console. Now my active sessions went from 2 to 4. So if we're supposed to go on top SQL, you'd see the SQL statement that is taking up the most resource has changed to this one here, the one that is doing the select top 1000 products. To view the full SQL statement, select the SQL statement, right? And then turn on the SQL text section, you'll see the full query that is executed on the database. Now once you have this information, you can always get your query and then tune that query. You can create additional indexes or update statistics if needed. So if we select top host, then my laptop should be the host that is taking up the most resource, and then here it should be the admin user. Under the metrics section, you could always add additional metrics that you want to be monitored. So I've added the deadlocks because monitoring locks is a very important thing that you want to monitor on your database. You can add additional metrics, and I'm going to select process blocked, and if there are blocking processes on the database, then it will be reflected here. So if you have a blocking process, then you may need to take action and cancel that blocking process. So let's go back on the RDS database instance. So select RDS, select database instances, then select MySQL or whichever database you created. Now here on the summary dashboard, you can see that my current activities is now showing up in red. So if I'm supposed to click on it, it will take me back to the performance dashboard. So let's go back again, database instances, MySQL. Now on the monitorings page, previously we were only able to monitor by the CloudWatch. So now that enhanced monitoring was enabled, you can view enhanced monitoring. So you'll see how your available memory is being utilized, your total SQL Server memory utilization, the number of CPU users, available disk space, so on and so forth. You could also change the view to OS process list, and it will show you what's happening on the OS side of things. If you select Performance Insights, it will take you to the Performance Insights dashboard. So all this may seem new to you, so it's good that you take some time to play around and get comfortable with it. So these are the out-of-the-box monitoring capabilities provided by Amazon RDS. In the upcoming lectures, we'll be taking a look at some other options that you can use to monitor your database.